your story, like why did you create FitrWoman?
Yeah, so I didn't create it personally. My kind of colleague and mentor, Georgie Brunvels, it was kind of her and our colleague, Gráinne Conifrey, was their like project. So whilst Georgie was doing her PhD, she was looking into iron and heavy menstrual bleeding. And I think one of the like main tipping points for her was she did this survey at the Expo, the London Marathon Expo in 2015, of about just over 1,000 women, and asking them kind of some kind of heavy menstrual bleeding questions, but also whether they felt that that their menstrual cycle affected their performance at any time, whether they had to miss training or adapt training. And so many of them said yes. And also she'd have women coming up to her and being like, oh, I'm due to have my period on the day of the marathon. What do I do? Like, on the expo, which is like 3 days before the marathon, and they hadn't thought about it, they hadn't prepared, they didn't know. So I think that like plus all the research that she was doing and reading as well led her down to the route of creating FitrWoman, which is kind of powered by Orico. So that's the company that like have supported us. So the CEO, Dr. Brian Moore, whilst Orico is primarily, was once upon a time primarily based in men's sport, he kind of answered Georgie's call and like funded the making of FitrWoman and the app. And I guess in those years, those 5 years, it's really come on like leaps and bounds. We've had a second version launch 2 years ago, and now we have a whole kind of female athlete consultancy program that is just like evolving, as well as we're obviously always trying to keep ourselves in research and reading and education. So
yeah, there's so much.
Yeah.
It was so exciting. So like who sort of like, was it Georgie's sort of idea to sort of launch an app? Was it sort of like, or was it just like the natural?
Yeah, I think it was probably Gráinne's idea. So she doesn't work for Orico anymore, but she was the other co-founder, and she is like product side. So Orico is a data science and sports science company. So we have those kind of two aspects that like meet together. So she was on that product data side, and they are very good at creating apps. So then they, like, with a little bit of outsourced kind of help, they created it themselves, and now we run it. So FitrWoman and FitrCoach, our coaching platform, are owned and created by Orico. So
yeah, we were reading up a bit about Orico. It seems like they had some really cool articles to go down. I think there were a couple of links to, I think one of the articles Georgie wrote, and it was sort of like, is there enough information about women's? And we were like, oh my god, we want to read that.
That paper is amazing because it's just like cited everywhere, because there's clearly such a dearth of research. Even I think one of the most amazing statistics that I'll like never forget is there was a TED talk by Alison McGregor. I don't know if you've watched it. I can send you a link. Yeah. And it was saying like 50%, was it 50%? Maybe 80%. Yeah, 80% of drugs in the US that are taken off the market are taken off because of adverse side effects in women, because they haven't thought to test them in men. And it's like, there's just no there is more research being done in women, but it's just so lacking.
Yeah.
We were working with a nutritionist lately, and she said the same thing, that most of the research is based on men. Not many things are known for women.
No. And like it really angers me, especially with like lots of like in nutrition as well. Like there are so many like evangelical people saying this is the way to eat, but actually, do they know the effects on women? Like you take the kind of low carb trend, And actually that could really interfere with a female's physiology, because we do process food differently to a man, but like that's not massively talked about. So
no, I mean, there's this woman in I don't know if you've probably have. I mean, she's Dr. Stacey Sims. She's American, and like I remember reading. I think I saw her TED talk, and I was like, oh my god, bring it on!
it's
And so I
great, yeah.
and try and like to sort of and try and understand more. And it was just like so much of it makes so much sense. And the thing I think which seems to sort of be so prevalent is that it's more difficult to figure out a woman. Women are so individual, whereas men are quite like you can kind of just apply.
Yeah.
And it's like I didn't realize that like in mice, like or even the mice tests all on little men mice,
male mice, yeah.
which is like it's really crazy. So what is the app's like target audience then? Are you sort of like doing full spectrum, or are you sort of targeting a group?
Yeah, I guess that's one that we kind of go back and forth about, because in the end it's an app that's free and will always be free. So I guess it's for everyone that menstruates with a particular interest in exercise. I guess like we do have an elite side, but I think our like key thing is that we want to take what we learn from working with elite sportswomen and apply it so that everybody can know those kind of things. Everybody can have access to this information, because why shouldn't they? Like,
Yeah.
we feel like we're so passionate about, especially things like keeping women exercising and active. Menstrual cycle can be a barrier, and we don't want that. Like, so yeah, everyone should know the information.
Yeah.
And just to clarify for the people that are going to watch this later, how is it different to a normal menstruating cycle app?
Okay, so there is a tracking feature, and we have algorithms that kind of work out where you are based on your average bleeding length, your average cycle length, and some of the research as well, obviously. And so there is this logging facility, as well as you can log symptoms, which is, I guess, becoming more common. I think once upon a time that wasn't a thing, that you didn't track your like PMS symptoms, but that is more done now. And then the kind of algorithms split you into 4 phases. So there are 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. We just number them for ease, but they're like your menstruation. So is phase 1 whilst you're bleeding. Phase 2 is the kind of mid to late follicular phase. So from the end of phase 1, so from the end of your bleeding days to ovulation. Phase 3 is ovulation to kind of pre-menstrual, so it's your luteal phase, or the majority of, and then phase 4 is that premenstrual time. And the different phases in research have potential different physiological, nutritional, and potential exercise kind of messages that we want to deliver. So, for example, at the end of phase 4 and beginning of phase 1, there's this drop off in hormones, and your baseline inflammation is likely to increase, and that may mean that you take a little bit more time to recover from training, from exercise. It may mean that you feel a bit more sluggish, and so things like increasing your fruit and vegetable intake with lots of antioxidants and potentially some like anti-inflammatory foods like omega-3 fatty acids could be really beneficial. So the app gives you that information in a really kind of easy to access way, and hopefully helps you kind of navigate any symptoms or how you're feeling at that particular time in the cycle. I guess the thing that we always say is that we never want anyone to feel like they can't exercise on that day, but they just got to be smart about it. And the other thing that we say is like, we always want people to perform to their best, whether that's performing in exercise, performing in life, in your work, whatever. So hopefully the information helps you do that.
That's lovely. That's lovely.
And you also have a FitR Coach app, and so they work in. My understanding is that they work in tandem together. So the FitR Coach is more for the elite athletes. Is that right?
Yeah, we have quite a lot, like of amateur kind of. Oh, that's not a very nice word, but like not like sub elite, like kind of more age. Let's say in individual sports, like in triathlon, it would be like age groupers, people who are taking it seriously, but like have a coach. Or for just kind of sports teams. Some we work with, like one of our ambassadors is a young like swimmer, and she's up and coming, but she's not an elite yet. But her coach uses it because he has a whole group of swimmers, and it's good to have for that. So yeah, it's FitR Coach is it. Like, I think it's a massive like game changer for anyone, for any coach with a team of women, especially a male coach, if they're not sure about how to have that conversation. So
definitely, and I think many male coaches have an understanding of the women's cycle and and periods, etc.
It's great. It really feels like it breaks down that barrier. It's like that's very special, because I think that's often gotten in the way, especially like old school sports where like, you know, like boxing, where you've got a really established regime or really and it's just like, no, we don't deviate. And it's very, but yeah, no, that's brilliant.
That's amazing. Yeah. How do you see the company, if you call it company, change and expanding in the future? What are your plans?
Oh, we have so many plans.
No, that's good. That's great.
That's great.
Unfortunately, we're a small team, so we can't always do everything at the same time. But there are so many things that we would like to improve about the app, about how it works. We're always trying to update the content. Recently, we did a massive review of all of it, which was really exciting. But that's obviously always evolving with the research that comes out. We want to take over the world. No. I do think. I think there are. Obviously, we would like to work with as many kind of sports teams as possible. We also have education kind of videos coming out hopefully in the next 6 months, and that will then make education sessions more accessible, because as I said, we're a small team and we can't do them all day long. But I guess they're kind of the key things. We're always looking for ways we can improve the app and engage more with everyone out there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, and do you see there, like we talked a little bit about how like there's not much research on women, and you sort of alluded to there's a bit more, but do you think that that's like going to sort of explode because there's so much interest now, and that you've got your app and you're always looking for developments and
I feel like it is happening, and it's also because of the of the algorithms of social media that I see now. I'm like, oh, there's research coming out every day. No, I think it is happening. I think there feels like there's been a massive shift. I think if you look in the media, in sports media, I think about kind of 2015 was that like key time when it was Heather Watson was like lost in the Australian Open in like the first round, and she said it was because, well, actually she didn't say it was because of her period and period pains, but she said it was because she had women's problems or something, like skirting around the issue. But it really, like, that started things. But then it kind of, now it feels like hopefully we're helping drive that, like, realization that women are not men, like, and that we need to work with female athletes with females in a different way to men. So yeah, I do think it is happening, but
yeah, no, I think you're in a really great position as well for that, because you've got the funding and you've got the sort of the vision,
yeah,
which is really exciting.
Unfortunately, it takes like probably 3 to 5 years for any research like outcome to have an actual impact. So there's always that delay of like
Sure.
doing the science. Like I did my master's 2 years ago, and it's only just been published, and like isn't like the findings of it weren't like game changing, but it is another contributing paper. But because of that 2-year gap between writing and doing the research and publication, it's going to be another 2 years before like anything happens. So
yeah, that's interesting that it takes that long.
yeah, it's so frustrating.
You must be like, why does it take? Come on, guys, I know it. I know the answers.
Yeah.
I have it all here.
I think that's actually one of the things that we've kind of had to work with in our like consult. So when Georgie works with Chelsea women's team very closely, or we do, and it's primarily through Georgie, and she, like, not everything is backed up by science, like 110%. We have to sometimes make a few kind of interpretations and like cross a few bridges. But if you've got a player coming to you being like, I can't play, I'm in excruciating pain, you can't be like, oh, I'm really sorry, but there's no research to back up anyhow. You just got to wait for 3 years.
You just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So yeah, you just got to use some really educated kind of strategy.
Yeah. Also, I mean, like, as women, your experience, obviously, you know what it feels like when you're in that pain. You're like, fair dues, go lie down. Like, you're not going to be like, you can push through it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that makes so Marina, do you want to?
What has been the general reaction to your app? I mean, has there been any criticism? I don't think so. But has there been any
It has been mostly positive, and I do the majority of FitrWoman social media at the moment, and it's great. Like, most of the time, we just get messages being like, "This is such a game changer. You've changed." Like, I had one yesterday. Like, "You've changed my life. I've rediscovered it in January, and I've just really attuned to my body now." I was like, "That's amazing."
Wow.
We've had a few backlashes from a few researchers. I think the academic world can be quite it can be quite a harsh place to be. Academics aren't afraid of letting you know exactly what they think, but they're always right themselves. And it's been quite hard it is hard, again, with that slight lack of research and having to bridge some gaps. Some researchers have been critical of things that they believe we've done or said, but actually some of that is also to do with the media's reporting, and how our work has been reported slightly inaccurately, which is hard because we're just sitting here like, we're absolutely doing everything we can to help with so yeah, that's been difficult, but mostly it's been really positive.
Do you have many male researchers working with you?
Yeah, so actually I work closely with Georgie, but our boss is Dr. Charlie Pedler, and he's a really experienced exercise physiologist and researcher, and he totally gets it, and he's been an absolute champion and support of all the work we're doing. A lot of Orico themselves, like a lot of Orico's team members are male, especially on the product side, so it's quite interesting every now and then to hear some kind of slightly more techie guys talk about phases of the menstrual cycle and how But it's great. I feel like we're educating at the same time.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, they're, you know, that'll do them brilliant. That'll
If they
sort
ever
them
have
out.
daughters, like
Exactly. I mean, even wives, just knowing, like, oh, you're in phase 4. Okay, I'll go.
I'll go. Like,
I'll breathe a bit.
No,
Yeah.
but in terms of research, actually, there are quite a lot of male researchers interested in this space, which is, I guess, it is amazing. Like, there's a researcher based at Lincoln University, and I've never heard someone be so passionate about the oral contraceptive pill, and it's a man. Like,
We want more of those.
yeah, exactly.
What does he say about the contraceptive pill?
That it is a major consideration, or should be a major consideration, and sometimes that is treated a bit too lightly. Lots of his research is looking at different formulations of the oral contraceptive pill as well, and how females react differently to different concentrations of hormones. And his PhD research was looking in elite women in the EIS system, so across all sorts of sports, looking at why they were using those forms of contraception, like who was using them, who wasn't, and then why, and whether they found it was beneficial or not. So it was some good statistics from that.
That's really interesting, because I've read a lot of like controversial stuff about the hormonal, putting hormones in your body.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to navigate, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, it was revolutionary 60 years ago, 70 years ago. It completely changed people's lives, but...
Sure. Yeah, exactly. At the same time, like, there is some research about it could... I think there are different aspects. So, like, on the energy... This is a total tangent, sorry. You can...
No, please.
But so in the female athlete kind of work, there is a lot about energy deficiency, loss of cycles, so like amenorrhea.
Yes.
And often amenorrhea, like in the past, amenorrheic women have been prescribed the oral contraceptive pill. But one of the things is that then masks any signs of energy deficiency. So you still think you've got a period when actually it's a withdrawal bleed, you're not responding to your body's signs of there's something wrong. So I think that's one of the kind of more like negative connotations with the pill, especially in terms of athletes or women who exercise. You don't have to be a professional athlete to lose your period because of training and nutrition and stress. I think there is other research on the especially combined oral contraceptive pill, showing that the exogenous estrogen and progesterone could cause a slightly higher level of inflammation and oxidative stress, which can then put your body it's doing a little bit more hard work. It's could impair recovery or alter your response to a stimulus. But at the same time, we don't want female athletes to get pregnant if they don't want to. We don't want anyone to get pregnant if they don't want to, if they're not ready for it. So sometimes it's about being savvy with it. We would always recommend having a break if you've been on the oral contraceptive pill for a really long time, just to check that everything is okay, especially if you're training hard or training a lot, or actually, interestingly, during times of stress, your cycle's more likely to go haywire. So it's a really good that's a really good sign to have your cycle, so that you know that your body's relatively healthy and happy. But if you mask it with the pill for 10 years, how do you know that? So we'd always recommend a little bit of a break if you can. And then there are obviously other forms of hormonal contraception potentially that might be a better fit for some women. So
What do you think about like the impact of contraception on like bone health? Because I've read some stuff about
it's
like
so controversial on our presentations that we kind of give athletes or coaches or parents. There's this like having a menstrual cycle is a vital sign of health. Like that's like a key takeaway. In terms of bone health, it's so hard. Like I think there was a systematic review that came out that said there wasn't any advantage to being on the combined pill for your bones, which is contradictory against like the kind of general what's happened before. There is some research suggesting that the transdermal patch is more protective of bone health. One of my colleagues, Dr. Christy Pop in the States, does a lot of work and research in bone health. And that was kind of one of her studies that she was involved with. I think, it's a really hard one because I think you've got to get to the root of the problem. You can't just keep covering it up. But if someone is an elite athlete, then maybe they still have to compete, and you don't want to deal with a stress factor as well as everything on top. So I think it's a really individual case by case scenario.
Yeah, no, absolutely wise, very wise.
As you said before, like as we all agreed, more needs to be done. Like more research needs to be done on women's body, on their hormonal changes. Can we do something as a general public to help to boost this? Is there any way that we could?
Yeah, I think talk, like, as simple as it sounds, I think talking about it is the most powerful thing. It's funny because I used to be so prudish about talking about periods and like just wouldn't talk to my friends or anyone about it. And now, like amongst my friends, I'm literally period girl. Like everyone comes to me.
Period girl.
And both Georgia and I feel like we have that. Like everyone, one of my friends, she was training really hard and she did like lose her period. And then about 2 months later, she did like put some work into like trying to get it back and kind of saw a nutritionist. And I just got this text saying it came back. And I was like, what? Like, yeah, I got my period back. I was like, well, you could have explained that first. I just thought that's what I thought about all the time.
I was like, oh yeah, I know that. I got you.
But I do think that talking, even it's just within your friends or people you train with or go to the gym with, I think that's so powerful because it gives that message that it's okay to keep talking about it. So I think like that's one thing. I think education is a massive thing, but like a massive kind of conundrum, and we're trying as much as we can, but like passing that education along, I think, is important. If you understand your body and your hormones at a particularly a young age, then hopefully you'll go on to start working with them rather than just ignoring them.
Yeah.
I guess they're the two biggest things. I don't know, open to any like light bulb moment. And obviously sharing FitrWoman as much as you can.
Yeah, there seems to be a space for that. I mean, like I was always appalled as an adult. I was appalled at my sex education at school, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like if you could go and guys need to learn this too, because like we're all there to help each other, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like that would be an amazing. I always thought that get them while they're young, and if you can just defeat those taboos, women are like can't talk about their periods or they hide it, or I'm so proud of mine.
Yeah. I think just the other thing is you learn about, well, like in the UK, is we learn about like hormones, FSH, LH, progesterone, estrogen, all of that like biology stuff in science, in biology. And then you might have PSHE or like a random like one-off, here's some sex education, here's how to have safe sex, like, but often those two things don't marry, like here's how to use a tampon. And it's like, well, if you phrase them together a bit better, I think that might help, because that's what periods are at the end of the day. Periods and menstrual cycles are just changes in hormones. And I think that maybe makes it more, if you just understand that it's a natural process, it makes it more accessible than just being like, oh, this is science and this is your body. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a good point.
Are you looking at expanding to other countries too? Or are you primarily based here?
We are starting to work with some US athletes and like hopefully spreading across the US. We actually have quite a lot of Fitter coach users in Australia and New Zealand, partly because of Stacey Sims, because she's based in New Zealand. But we're at the moment it's just an English language app, so we don't have the capacity to translate it into any other language. But I think we do work, like Oracle do have kind of researchers and team members in the States, so but it's hard to break America.
Is it? How come?
Well, it's just such a big country, I think. We do, again, we have kind of a few ambassadors that we work with are American, and hopefully that spreads it a bit more. But the majority, I think about half of our users are American, and then about 30% are British and Irish, maybe. So, and then 20% everything else.
Yeah, that's pretty good spread. You're covering different corners.
Yeah, exactly. One day we'll have it in. We have one of our lawyers is Spanish speaking in America, and he is constantly trying to hook us up with the Mexican Football League.
Oh wow!
Which is amazing, but obviously we can't have FitrWoman in Spanish at the moment, so we've got to bridge that gap.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Do you work with any martial arts or combat sport, boxing, anything like that?
No, we don't, and I think that's a massive.
We need it. Just say.
I think so. One of our Oracle nutritionists works a lot in boxing, primarily male boxing, but I think he works with a few female boxers as well. Obviously, nutrition in boxing and martial arts is a massive component because of the making weight for different but that's also where menstrual health can really take a nosedive. And so I think it's a total untapped kind of area of sports that we would love to branch into and to work with, because it is so needed. I've heard awful stories.
Having to weight cut and having to perform really high intensity as well, because a lot of your things are sort of running and sort of they're sort of I don't know if it's right, but there's a different kind of intensity, because in fighting you have really intense and really intense, and that I guess that's a bit different for women in compared to running or cycling or swimming or
definitely. I guess it is more it's not like sprinting, but it's more power. And I think that's probably potentially more influence. Your cycle has more capacity to influence that, because I think lethargy and fatigue, you don't want it. How can you generate power no? So because I think that's again stems from kind of copying how the men do it.
Yep.
And whilst I'm sure that male fighters, boxers, martial artists pay consequences later on in life, it doesn't seem to affect them as much when they're extreme weight cutting and putting on, like binging. Whereas I think it's just more stressful for the female body in like an immediate circumstance. So yeah, it baffles me that it's kind of allowed and continues that kind of cycling.
I mean, it's
horror.
Yeah, particularly in like MMA, I guess, is other than boxing, that's super high level athleticism and like, you know, concussions and all of those sorts of things. And water loading for women is just so not good. It's so much worse for them than men, and it's like,
for sure.
Anyway, it'd be interesting.
To move into that.
Well, even
and we need you there. really need you there.
It's like even in concussion, like that. If concussion can play havoc with your menstrual cycle as well,
Really?
there's some researchers in the States doing some research on it at the moment. Obviously, concussions are a really hard area because you can't like enforce people to get concussed, so you have to kind of just wait for it to happen. But that it has the potential to kind of alter and disturb your cycle. So
wow. I guess that makes sense because it's extreme stress on your body, and your body is then just like, oh, well, no babies.
Yeah, I can't have a baby right now.
I can't have a baby right now. I gotta get up.
Yeah.
Does that also impacting like, you know, like impacting boobs and impacting organs? Then does that? I don't know if there's any research on that impacting your cycle or those sorts of things.
I don't know. I haven't ever come across any. That doesn't mean there isn't. I guess that would definitely increase like muscle damage. And if you're not recovering properly or adequately or sufficiently after that muscle damage, because you're getting kicked, is going to increase like your CK levels, so it's going to increase loads of inflammatory markers in your blood. And if you don't have the capacity, so potentially if you don't have the fuel, or you're not sleeping, or you are more stressed, then I can imagine that it could impact it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because there's some of the jitsu athletes we know, like they've got loads of lumps in their boobs now from impact. Yeah, like they're just like women who've been doing it for 10, 15 years. Like they started getting, which is why this breast protection thing was so amazing when it came out.
So devastating that stopped.
As well. I mean, there's another company called Unorthodox which does really interesting pelvic guard stuff for boxing, and that's women specific, and that's really exciting because again, it's like getting punched in your ovaries repeatedly isn't great for you. So
I used to do kick. I have a very interesting background, but I trained as a dancer, but I used to do kickboxing alongside, which was great because I was really flexible. But honestly, the thing I hated the most was being hit, because it just hurt and I will win. But I think like those kind of things could have changed it. I may have still be doing it. Maybe a champion. No.
Maybe, you never know. Champion kickboxer. Yeah, I think it's having like definitely having adequate equipment, because that's the other side of the coin, isn't it? It's sort of doing your insides, which is what you're doing, and then it's doing the external equipment, making sure your gloves are actually fitting you, making sure, you know, all of those sorts of things. I mean,
and do they do female specific gloves now?
This company does.
Oh, okay, cool.
So they're really cool.
Yeah, they're saying the male hand has nothing to do with the female hand. So the wrist needs different protection for women. So they can design for women. The are especially designed for women, which is great.
Yeah,
that is so
cool.
good. Yeah.
It's very
The world
exciting.
is changing slowly.
Slowly. Oh,
Like, oh, come on, just speed up a little bit more.
yeah, exactly. It does feel a bit like that.
It feels that we're so advanced, yet some fundamental stuff had not stepped up yet.
But like, that's so interesting because I think that's a lot to do with the like speed at which women's sport has become professionalized, and how it's like all of a sudden, bam, like, and how women are just like suddenly participating and encourage, and that's great, but the knowledge that comes with doing that sport is lacking. So like the most basic example is so many of the females that we work with, like elites, eat like 0 to 2 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. Like if you, don't get me started. And then they have excruciating menstrual symptoms, and you're like, oh, I wonder why. But and it's like if you talk to one of our, like a nutritionist, a sports nutritionist, and said that, oh, the men's team, like they don't eat fruit and veg, he would be like, well, they're not athletes, like they're not, because like that is just a given thing that athletes need to like really like look after themselves nutritionally. But because women's sport has just become like so quickly professionalized, they've missed that step of education. So they don't know that actually they should be like having some fruit and veg and getting some sleep. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes it's really those basic things that can be game changing for anybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, also the funding. I mean, because a lot of
Yeah.
women don't get, like in jiu-jitsu, they don't earn nearly as much as the men. In boxing, they don't. And so like they have to have a job as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then how do they train and job and eat
and be good in here? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It is crazy. But hopefully it'll change.
Yeah, hopefully there is this, I think like campaigns like This Girl Can as well, just spreading so much awareness of females participating in sport can only be good, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And helps with menstrual pain. I mean, as long as you can get out of bed, obviously.
I know, but if you can't get out of bed, then maybe you should go and see your doctor.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think that we shouldn't keep like suffering in silence all the time. Having a really painful period and like loads of symptoms that gets in the way of your quality of life is not normal, and shouldn't be. And so you should definitely seek help.
Yeah, I read something interesting, which is like if you are in pain enough to basically interrupt your life, something very, very could be probably going on, which is not good. And it's like endometriosis is like 1 out of 9 women have it, and it takes like up to 9 appointments with a doctor to be diagnosed.
It's ridiculous.
It's absolutely. I mean, like that's another side of the coin which I'd love to sort of explore. Is like actually like those sort of major stages of problems like endometriosis or polycystic ovary syndrome. Those problems which are like women don't know they don't even know what to be looking out for, and so many have it.
I know. It's like interest. So Georgie and another researcher, Dr. Jess Piasecki, have a podcast called the Female Athlete Podcast.
I think we found that.
So, up and coming is an episode about endometriosis. So
cool. All right, we'll definitely listen out for that.
And like address more topics as they go on. So I think hopefully, again, it's about education.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah,
so
we're shouting about it.
Is the Female Athlete Pod connected to FITAR, or is that a separate enterprise?
No, it's just that Georgie is like a connecting link. Yeah, she's involved in, but it's technically not FitrWoman, but because it's got Georgie on it, like, and it's about all the things that FitrWoman are passionate about, we kind of help push it
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool.